Hey everybody, happy Monday.
Happy Monday, everyone. Glad you're here. Today we've got a versus video.
Yes, we do.
And in this one, it's the angelfish versus the severum. Which one is better? Love to hear from you down in the comments section below. Do you have a preference? Which one do you like more? We're going to go over the advantages, disadvantages of each, help you in case you are looking at adding one of these fish or more to a tank. Some things to consider. Thanks for being here.
All right, first, let's get the similarities out of the way. First of all, they're very similar water parameter requirements.
Yeah, so the water parameters, and they're both relatively, for the most part, if you get tank-raised specimens, they're going to have a range. That range is somewhere going to be around, when it comes to pH, a little bit less than 7. We keep ours, both our angelfish and our severums, at a pH of as high as 8 to 8.2. They've been living a long, happy life in that for a long time, but ideally you want to be closer to neutral for both if you can. Water hardness is roughly the same. They're going to be tolerant anywhere from 3 to 10, maybe even 12 degrees on your KH and GH. Our KH and GH are around 10 degrees for both of those. Temperatures, keep them around 78. They're both going to be happy there. Angelfish can go a little bit higher than the severums, but for the most part, they're going to be roughly the same. I think the other thing too, and you mentioned the temperament. Yeah. They can be, for the most part, pretty similar. They're cichlids, right? So both the angelfish and the severums are cichlids. For the most part, they can do well in a community type tank as long as the fish that they're in aren't too small where they can be eaten. But we've kept our angelfish and our severums in community type tanks for the most part, almost exclusively, and they both fit in well. I will say, I don't know if you agree with this or not, the severums at least tend to be slightly more assertive. Again, not necessarily aggressive, but assertive in the sense that if there is another fish that has kind of a similar personality, they will sometimes make sure that they're not being bullied. If you keep multiple severums together, especially multiple males, they may be a little bit more rough than some of the angelfish will. That's not to say the angelfish will ignore male on male conflict, but the severums are a little bit more assertive. Now, one of the things to consider, a little bit of a difference here, is the tank size. I know people have kept angelfish in tanks as small as a 29-gallon. I personally don't like to keep them in tanks that small. I'd like to go 40-gallon breeder or more. I especially like the taller tanks like the 55s and the 75s long-term. And when it comes to the severums, I really, really want a minimum of a 75-gallon. They're not going to work long-term in your smaller tanks like a 29-gallon. That 75-gallon, that 4-foot tank really does help a lot. Maybe a 55, but these fish, they get pretty large, and I think that's another thing to consider when it comes to the differences. The angelfish get taller.
Yes, they do. Totally different shape.
Yeah, absolutely. So the angelfish, we've had veil-tail angelfish in our 150-gallon that got to be about 12 inches from the top of its tail to the bottom. So they can get very tall. Where the severums, they tend to be just overall, their body size tends to be larger than an angelfish, but they also tend to be thicker bodied as well. Thus one of the reasons why you want those larger tanks for the severums.
Now for the other characteristics of their appearance, they are very different, and something to keep in mind, with angelfish, you're going to get a whole lot more variety. They come in dozens of different kinds. So if you want to pick out something very special, you may want to lean towards those angels. But the severums, they have a lot brighter and just more intense colors.
For sure. So angelfish, like you said, there's dozens of different types. But not only that, you've got standard tail and veil tail, so you've got those differences as well. And there are a lot of different varieties. I mean, the koi angelfish are so pretty. You got the pearl scales. Yeah. You got the green angels that are starting to come about right now, the blues. So a lot of cool angelfish out there. I would say, yeah, the severums, though, they tend to be more brightly, more vibrant. When you see a really pretty gold severum or a really pretty red spot gold severum, the red shoulders are amazing. Even the greens on a lighter substrate look really pretty. So one of the reasons why you're probably trying to consider angels and severums is the way they look. They really both are beautiful fish. They're just kind of beautiful in their own way. So other things to consider is if you're into breeding, I think the angels are a little bit more prolific in their breeding. and you get some really large spawns. You get some large spawns with the Severums as well. We've had some pretty large ones with our Severums. But angelfish, it just seems like they're a little bit easier to breed, so much so that you have to be careful. At some point, you might have to separate the male and the female because you might get way too many angelfish and overrun a market. So just be careful with that.
Something to keep in mind with the Severum, we have a pair that I just love. They're red gold Severum, and they're very personable. I would have to say they are a little bit more personable than the angels. They'll see you come in, they'll be very inquisitive, but at the same time as being more personable, they can be very shy and very easily spooked, so you have to give them some space.
Yeah, that is definitely the case, especially if I've found with Severums that are a little bit on the smaller side, they will tend to be a little bit more shy, a little bit more reserved early on. Our larger Severums, not quite as shy, but they're also relatively inactive, and I would say the angelfish, especially when it comes time to eat, they're going to be a little bit more like, hey, how's it going, and not be necessarily so shy long term. Now, another thing to keep in mind, especially as it pertains to angelfish, because they tend to have those longer flowing fins, make sure your tank mates aren't going to be nipping at their fins. In fact, we did an angelfish buddies video, which I will put in the description below. We've also done an angelfish care video along with Severum care videos. If you want more information on these fish, check out the description below. But yeah, make sure you don't have fish that are going to take little chunks out of your angelfish tails. Not quite as important with the Severums, one, because I think, well, one, the Severums don't have finnage that is quite as long, and two, like we talked about, the Severums tend to not get into or not tolerate fish bullying them as much as angels might.
And a fun fact about Severum that you may want to keep in mind, they'll eat your plants. If you have any plants in there, you can kind of kiss them goodbye, because they really love plants. And not only plants, but they'll also eat snails, which could be good or bad.
Yeah, so unlike the angelfish, at least in terms of what we've experienced in our fish, angelfish for the most part ignore the snails. We've got snails in our angelfish tanks, but any fish tank where we have Severums, we don't have snails. And I used to actually feed pest snails, the pond snails, ram's horn snails to our Severums. They absolutely love them. That last downside you mentioned is a huge downside and something you need to consider. At least for us, every single type of plant we've ever tried to put in a tank with Severums has gone completely missing. Anything from floating plants like hornwort, they love to eat duckweed, they've eaten anubias, they've ripped out jungle vel and made it go away. So yeah, the Severums are definitely going to do a number on your plants, making them into a salad. So angelfish, for the most part, I have never experienced them eating any plants. They ignore them. So it's an important thing to consider. So those were some things to consider when you're looking at angelfish and Severums. Again, would love to hear from you in the comments section below. Do you have a favorite and why? Thanks for being here, and we'll see you in the next one.
Bye.